Howdy, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of JT Real Talk Industry Leaders. Enjoy.
Thanks again, Rachel, for being here. Lamar Real Estate. As I mentioned before, I was doing a bunch of research on you or just casual reading, which turned into research because you've done so much. Would you mind just sharing with the audience, about who you are? Start with your name, with the brokerage, and maybe that 35,000-foot overview of how it's going now and where you are.
Sure. Well, first of all, I'm glad that the research didn't put you to sleep. But I'm Rachel Lamar. I am a broker and owner of my own little real estate firm, Lamar Real Estate. I started out as an attorney and was practicing law, real estate law, among other things, many, many years ago. And then I had children. And after my son was born, I realized, wow, I can't sit in a law office all day. I'd miss everything. So I stopped practicing and I thought, I'll take a little break. And I ended up taking 7-year break from law. And then when my kids were a little, older and in school, I knew I wanted to go back to do something, not just sit around the house all day. And I thought that if I went back into law, I'd never see my kids. So I thought I'll get my real estate license, right? I can do that part time, which is, erroneously what so many people think, right? And so I jumped into that and I was with the first internet-based company at the time, used to be called Zip Realty, and I became their top producer here in San Diego County, and things just kind of just went like this, and it was great. So that was 2003. And then in 2010, I had realized for many years, everyone always said, well, you're an attorney and a broker. Why are you working for, because then I went into other corporate firms and smaller firms, and I decided to finally open my own brokerage. So I've had some agents over the years, but mostly I'm an independent broker. And that's partly because I am a self-confessed type A person and it's hard for me to manage. And I think when you're a broker, there needs to be a certain amount of oversight of people, of agents. So I do have an agent now. I'm about to take another one on, but I like it that way. When there's just a few, it's easy to do. So that's
Ama-
me in a nutshell.
Amazing. Wow. So you've been practicing, well, real estate for quite some time, but you were a real estate lawyer to begin with. And how kind of beautiful and serendipitous is it that it was the blessing of your children that kind of spurred you moving into real estate, and you seem to be thriving in this industry, although it can be stressful and difficult at times, and it's definitely that people type of industry, but
Mhm.
starting your own brokerage. So tell me a little bit about that. What sort of trends have you seen and did you go through the housing market crisis in 2008? Were you a real estate agent at that time?
Oh yes, I've been a real estate agent since 2003.
It's
So I've seen this is my 23rd year. So I've seen everything, I think. Pretty much a little bit of everything.
And how would you compare then what we kind of experienced from 2019, then 2020 through these past 4 to 5 years to that housing market crisis in 2008?
Oh wow, that's an interesting question. They're very different, obviously. I think that crisis was created by the lenders and the banks lending money to people who clearly weren't qualified, right? So
Right.
um, that was that was a doozy. I actually was working with a gal at the time in a small independent brokerage. It wasn't my own brokerage, but I was working with her for her as a broker. And we wrote a book in 20, I think it was 2009. I can't remember.
2008 foreclosure book?
Well, oh, did you see that?
Huh?
Yeah. So, so the book was on. So we were getting frustrated because we had so many clients calling us and saying, "Oh my gosh, my house is going to go into foreclosure. What do I do?" And so I wrote this book about telling people that there are options. And it was a very specific time because these companies were popping up everywhere, calling themselves kind of marketing themselves as the solution to foreclosure. And they were called mortgage walkaway companies. They were calling themselves that. And they basically said, oh, turn in your keys and just walk away. And they'd show people walking off into the sunset together. And the lady I was working for and I would just look at each other and scratching our heads like, people are intentionally foreclosing on their homes when there could be other options. So we wrote this book. It became this huge, like, live thing because the laws were changing locally, at state levels, at city levels, at federal levels on a almost daily basis at the time because things were moving so quickly. And so we did some press, and then I was supposed to be on Larry King Live, and then something happened in LA at that time. I don't remember what it was, and they tabled that, and we never got back. But the book really helped a lot of people, and at some point in time, I had to turn it all off, like turn off the website, because I had people calling me from all over the country asking me questions, and I would say, I don't know your law there, so I can't really help you. But it was kind of a guide to just help people get through that whole foreclosure nightmare. What I'm seeing now is just, or since I guess right before the pandemic, this crazy seller's market that we've been in since the market crashed, right, in 2008. And we saw all of a sudden starting in about 2019, the prices just started skyrocketing. And I'm sure you remember, standing in line to get into open houses, right? It was just insane. So I think they're very different in the sense that and people are saying, is the market going to crash now because, homes are so high priced? I don't foresee it crashing. I definitely think we're heading into a buyer's market. Some areas have already reached Las Vegas, Nevada, total buyer's market. Riverside County here in California, buyer's market, nothing selling. Here in San Diego County, some areas might, I don't think we're 100% in a buyer's market, but there's a lot more negotiating power for the buyers right now. So when you ask how different they are, I think it's just different situations. I think here gosh, I don't know if I can say people, people within the industry, via sellers and just prices going up, creating the craziness. Whereas before it was the lenders that were creating the problem.
Right,
So,
right, absolutely. Yeah, the 2008 seemed a little bit more manufactured as opposed to
mhm.
what we've seen here since the pandemic. It was just, I guess, a more organic frenzy for people in order to move or to sell or whatever their reason was. And obviously going through a global pandemic and kind of push people into some difficult or crazy directions. With the buyer's market situation currently in Austin, we had in September 130% more sellers than buyers. And I'm curious as to how you go, because as I mentioned, mostly listing agent here in Austin, and the tough conversations that we're having to have with sellers on a daily basis, and trying to allow them to understand that it isn't a crash. Your property is not depreciating. It is a major correction, though. And so I'm curious as to kind of your personal take on how you go about those conversations.
Gosh, I agree with you 100%. I think there are sellers. I actually just had one recently who insisted on sticking to a very inflated price in the beginning, and it really hurt us. So we had to do some major price reductions and ended up finally selling it, but it took a long time. So I think that we as the real estate agents, brokers, we have to educate the sellers, and sometimes they don't want to listen. And so if hey, well, my neighbor's house sold for $2 million, I think I should sell for 2.2. Well, when now the market may be showing that maybe it's worth 1.9. And so I think we really need to have that conversation and provide the research, not just of the neighborhood, because sometimes the neighborhood research doesn't support what we're saying, right? It will support what they're saying, which is, hey, Sally and Joe's house next door sold 3 months ago for this price. So I think mine is worth more now, or the same price. And what we're seeing is longer market times, longer, things falling out of escrow, going back on the market, things like this. So we really have to show them that way and show them what's happening out there. And it's, hey, I'd love to list your house for that price, Mr. Buyer and Seller. I mean, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, sorry. But here's the reasons why I don't recommend it. And yeah, I think sellers right now have to be really smart with the list price, and what you come on the market with is so important, as you know, rather than saying, well, let's try this and then reducing later, because then I don't know about there in Austin, but here, when I put properties on the market and they don't sell right away, I'm not seeing people jump in with low offers. They're just sitting there waiting. They're waiting for the reduction, and then they're going to make an offer even lower, right? So I think it's just an education process, but it takes time for, of course, we've been in a seller's market for so long. It takes time for people to really understand what's happening.
Absolutely. And with data can sometimes come confusion. We do
Mhm.
market absorption reports, and we, instead of looking in the past and what has sold, we also work to look into the future. And if we have 4 to 5 months worth of inventory, we need to price it a certain percentage, 5% or so below current sales prices, because it's going to continue to go that
Exactly.
way. Appraisers are going to go about their appraisals with those numbers in mind as well. And I want to bring it back to your point of them. Oh, my neighbor sold for this. Can't we sell for that? Or the Zillow estimates, the Zestimates. And so I'm selfishly going to ask you this question because you are a real estate lawyer. I would love to get your thoughts on what's going on with Zillow and
Yeah, I mean, really, I haven't been very as much involved in that. I think Zillow, they've been very popular and within the real estate sphere now for a while, and they've tried many things that haven't succeeded. Obviously, their platform is successful, and a lot of people still trust them. Yeah, I think I always educate my clients when I go on a listing presentation with data and with experience as to what the market is, where we were and how we got to where we are now, and what, like you said, looking at the future as well. And I have had people who said, "Well, Zillow says my house is worth X dollars," and I say, "Well, that's a computer. That's not generating where you are on the block, what your view is, what your upgrades are. Zillow hasn't been in your house. Zillow doesn't know. If you're in a tract neighborhood and you have model A and there's ABC, yes, Zillow can say, oh, last model A sold for this, but maybe that model A backed up to a big wall or was on a road that was loud. I mean, so I always take that with a grain of salt. Truly, most of my clients are referral based and most people trust me, and I have great lenders that I work with, and if they bring their own lender, that's great too. But
I was just curious your thoughts.
yeah, yeah,
Well, and just to kind of put a button on the whole point of with sellers, data, and then what my neighbor sold for. Really, it's a matter of their personal circumstance and their situation, and so we really try to future pace their mentality to the point that okay, well, this is what this number is showing us, and how much longer it's going to take for us to get under contract. Is that worth delaying moving closer to your grandkids or getting into that new job? You have a deadline to get there. So really trying to make sure that we're working with them in their psychology so they can wrap their head around, their life and what it's going to look like if we just continue to sit at this number. Okay,
right.
switching gears a bit. Would love to hear where you think the industry is going. We have a lot of changes, a lot of new technology, AI, things like that. I'm curious where
Yeah.
you think it's going and if there are any pain points that you still have or that you foresee for yourself and your business moving forward?
Sure. So, where do I think the industry is going? Yes, there are a lot of changes. And I think, we've lost a lot of agents because of the changes, because of the fear initially of the changes. People were thinking, oh my goodness, how am I ever going to sell something? Especially, I think the people who haven't been doing this long enough and don't have, client or base. How am I going to be a buyer's agent if I have to have people sign something and I haven't sold anything, right? So we have that. We also have the AI. I think AI is definitely going to play a role. I think it's going to be very helpful in some ways, like marketing,
Mhm.
um, things like that. I just was asked this question recently, and my answer is the same. That I think real estate is, because of all the legalities involved, that it's not an industry where you can be without a fiduciary holding your hand and walking through it. I have tons of investor clients. It's very different when I sell them a property. There's no emotions. It's all about the numbers. It's all about the net. Versus when I just closed 2 days ago with some brand new homeowners, first time homeowners. And that first time home buyers is very different. So I think people are still needed, but the thing is that buyers and sellers are getting wise and realizing that, they have choices. I mean, people have always known they have choices, but I think people are getting wise and realizing that it makes a big difference who you hire to sell your house or to help you buy a house. And that kind of segues into so I guess my conclusion on that would be that I think the agent is still going to be needed, but you're really going to have to step up. There's no more of this like, hey, I'm going to jump into real estate because my neighbor Bob's getting rich on real estate, and just I'm going to do it part time. I mean, it's a full time job, as you know. So that brings me to the next thing, which is the pain points you talked about. And I think that I've been doing this now. This is my 23rd year in doing real estate. And I think for me, the biggest problem comes from it's agent based. And
Mm,
it's people who don't communicate, who don't respect that we have timelines and that things need to get done. There's dates that things need to get done. When I have to continuously call, and I have a transaction right now that this is happening, it's driving me crazy. The agent, his transaction coordinator, escrow, and ask, what's going on with this file? What's going on with this? Where's this document? Why hasn't this been signed? I can't remove my contingencies because of A, B, and C. What's happening? That makes me nuts because I know, being an attorney, how important it is to stick to these timelines, because that's why we have so many real estate lawsuits, because people don't do their job, there's negligence, or they don't stick to the deadlines. So I think that problem has always been around and will probably always be around. But what I've noticed, and I was just talking to my transaction coordinator about this a few days ago, it seems so much worse right now than it has been in a long, long time. And I'm just seeing people just not able to do their jobs. So I think for me, that's really frustrating because then, I have to go in and try to make things happen on both sides, which that's not my job. My job is to be the fiduciary for my client. But as the fiduciary for my client, I want to make sure that we get to the closing, because that's what my clients want. So it really puts me and other agents in a buyer's agents or listing agents, both ends, in a difficult situation. So I
mm.
think for me, that's the hardest part really, is just I don't know if you want to call it laziness, or
It's a people problem.
it's a people problem. I mean,
Yeah.
in my opinion, I mean, that's what I see the most.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, and that makes sense. I'm not quite sure what happened. My father was in the military, 24 years in the army, and growing up, built discipline, and character, and initiative, and work ethic, and it just seems, and I think it has probably to do with the advance of technology, smartphones in the mid 2000s, and then so on. It's just the immediate gratification has really stifled a lot of people's desire to effort in so that they can achieve something that may not happen right away, but it'll be a huge achievement once it gets there. They want something immediate, and they just
yes,
can't seem to get past not having it right away.
yes, you nailed it. That's exactly it. And I also think, the younger generations too, of like your dad, like you said, work ethic for me growing up was huge. Education was huge. And being a doer, being an achiever was huge. And I feel like now I have kids in their 20s, and, they even say to me, gosh, my generation is so lazy, mom. It's just people don't care. They don't, they go to their jobs and they don't care, and they call in sick and play video games all day. I mean, I don't know. I definitely think technology has aided that quite a bit. I don't know. I mean, we used to have the beaver cleaver world back in the 50s and 60s, where people respected authority, they respected their parents, they respected their teachers. Now we're seeing the opposite of all of that. So it bleeds into every industry and everything that we do. I mean, if you have someone who didn't care about school and didn't care about education, and maybe wasn't raised right as far as having morals and values, and then they come into this business, yeah, you're setting a monster loose. So
That's right. And it's all hustle in this business. You can't get away with just sitting behind a desk, and having somebody hand you something and say, do this. You have to figure out what it is that needs to be done, and get it done on your own accord.
exactly.
Well, Rachel, as we wrap up, I'm curious as to where you hope to see yourself go, what
Mm.
sort of growth that you're looking for in the future.
So I'm always, I think my main goal is always the same, is really to just keep doing what I'm doing. And I posted a picture on social media yesterday of my clients, and I said, this is my favorite part. And they're standing in front of their house, and they're not on social media, so they didn't want their faces, but they're standing and they're just looking at their house with their arms around each other. And I said, "This is my favorite part." Like, I just got the chills. And it sounds cheesy, but when I get to that point where somebody's happy, somebody's just feels satisfied and is excited and they made it and they're here and now they're a homeowner, or the seller, now they sold their home and they can move on to the next stage of their lives. That for me is the reason I do this. I mean, I love that. And so I think that, I mean, yes, do I make projections and do I have, set goals as to what I want to do in the following year and the years to come? Of course. But to me, it's really just more about doing the best that I can do to make people happy, because my business is probably 95% or higher referral based. And so I feel so blessed that I am at that point where I don't have to market myself. I don't think I've ever marketed myself actually. I market my listings. I market that. But so as long as I can keep making people happy and I'm happy. So moving forward, I, I do want to maybe learn some more about using AI. I'm kind of studying that a little bit, and when I do have marketing and such, but I really just want to keep pleasing my clients. And yeah, it sounds silly, but it's
Oh,
that's what gets me up in the morning. I have other business. I have another business too, but this for me is what does it.
got it. Wow. That's beautiful. Well said. Way to put a button on the conversation. And the world needs a lot more happiness these days. So, and like we said before, this is a people person business. We're helping people, and it's important that we always keep that in mind. As agents, we can sometimes get lost in the minutia of the contracts and the transactions and everything else. It's always important to keep in mind that we're here to help.
Exactly. Yeah. And I love what you said about just happiness and being positive and all of that. It's if we are happy and we are positive and we help guide our clients, we make a huge difference. That's all we
Definitely.
can ask for. Yeah.
Well, Miss Rachel Lamar, it's a pleasure. Thank you so much for being here. Really do appreciate it. Would love to be able to stay in touch with you, just to have an industry contact, and perhaps maybe we can work together sometime in the future.
I love that. Thank you so much for having me today.
All right, Rachel. Have a good evening.
You too.
Bye bye.